A top-secret military program recruited people with impossible abilities. A scientist discovered something toxic in a product used by millions of Americans. People who suspected these things were just laughed at. Then the truth was revealed. These are insane conspiracy theories that turned out true. Part 2. Make sure you guys watch the full video because I'm going to link part 1 at the end. But you don't have to watch it in any particular order. It would mean the world if you guys subscribe, and I will do the best that I can to put out the best videos I possibly can for you. I'm Visual Venture and you are awesome. The psychic spy conspiracy. Most wars are won with weapons, soldiers, and strategy. But in the 1970s, the US military tried to use human superpowers to fight a war. They secretly recruited psychics and fortune tellers. People who heard the rumors didn't believe it. But years later, declassified documents revealed everything. Here's how it started. In the early 1970s, the CIA was worried about the Soviet Union. Reports claimed the Soviets were spending millions of dollars studying psychic powers. They wanted to build a team of psychics that could see what Americans were doing from hundreds of miles away. The idea sounded impossible, but the US government couldn't ignore even the smallest threat. So the CIA also quietly launched its own psychic research program. It was called the Stargate Project. They started recruiting Americans who claimed they had psychic abilities. The most promising candidates were brought to a secret location in Maryland. Their first task was simple. They needed to prove that they were really psychic. Each candidate was locked in a room and given a series of tests. In one test, a researcher secretly looked at a picture. The psychic then had to read the researcher's mind and draw whatever image they were thinking about.
On the left side of the page, you see the original target, and on the right, Geller's response.
When the drawings were compared to the original images, they claimed that some were surprisingly close.
In fact, this is the most off-target of the drawings that he did.
Some candidates passed the tests. They were ready for their first psychic spy mission. The psychics were given the coordinates of specific locations. Then they were asked to describe what was happening there. They called it remote viewing. Once they started talking, the researchers were stunned. It seemed that a lot of their information was quite accurate.
We were finding information that saved lives that couldn't be found in any other way, not even through spy-in-the-sky satellites or ground agents.
Some psychics could reportedly see into Soviet military bases. Their descriptions were incredibly detailed. No one could explain how they were supernaturally seeing these things, but those running the program were satisfied. Over the years, more than 20 psychics were employed. They took part in high-level intelligence missions, but the entire program stayed top secret. Then in 1979, Project Stargate was given its biggest challenge. That year, a Soviet plane crashed somewhere in the jungles of Central Africa. The aircraft was full of secret codes and valuable technology. Americans wanted to find it before the Soviets did. Recovering it would give the US a huge advantage in the war. For weeks, US satellites scanned the area, but the jungle was so thick they found nothing. The clock was running out. The US was desperate, so they turned to Project Stargate for help. For this mission, they chose a psychic named Rosemary Smith. Rosemary was handed a map of Africa and asked to find the fallen plane. They gave her no other information. According to those in the room, Rosemary went into a trance. After a few minutes, she pointed to a spot on the map. Then she gave them exact coordinates. When the military focused its satellite cameras on that location, they found the plane, right where she said it would be. The US government was impressed, but there was no public celebration. The military wanted the psychic program to remain secret. Then someone opened their mouth and ruined everything. Somehow, an investigative reporter named Jack Anderson found out about Project Stargate, so he published a series of articles exposing it. He revealed how the psychics supposedly helped locate enemy submarines and planes. He also claimed they helped catch a spy. The news spread across the country, but instead of panic or outrage, people just laughed it off. The public simply didn't believe it. The government also denied everything. The Department of Defense claimed no money was spent for ESP or whatever sort of label you want to put on those programs. The story was treated like a conspiracy theory. Eventually, it was forgotten. Then in 1995, the truth finally came out. Some CIA documents were declassified, and they confirmed that the Stargate project was real. The CIA even admitted it. Not long after that, the program was shut down. But the reason surprised people. The government claimed the psychics were unreliable. In other words, it seemed their information was wrong most of the time. The program turned out to be true. But the question is, did these psychics just get lucky? This next chapter is about a theory that the government was actually killing thousands of its own citizens purposely. The poisoned alcohol conspiracy. In the 1920s, a terrifying conspiracy theory spread across America. A doctor claimed the government was poisoning alcohol to kill citizens. But if that was true, the question is why? In 1920, the United States government banned the sale and production of alcohol. The law became known as prohibition. Lawmakers believed alcohol was destroying American society. They thought banning it would reduce crime, improve families, and clean up the country.
If they could ban it, all of America's problems would definitely 100%, without a doubt, be completely and totally solved.
Police raided warehouses and smashed barrels of alcohol. But almost immediately, the law failed. People didn't stop drinking. They just started drinking in secret.
Almost overnight, a whole underground economy sprang up dedicated to smuggling and selling alcohol. If anything, alcohol consumption became more widespread as people sought to outwit the law.
Bootleggers needed huge amounts of alcohol to keep up with demand, so they came up with a dangerous idea. They would turn industrial alcohol into drinking alcohol. Industrial alcohol was used in paint, cleaning products, and medical supplies. It was never meant to be consumed because it contained harmful chemicals, but that didn't stop them. Some people filtered industrial alcohol, bottled it, and secretly sold it in bars. As demand grew, thieves started breaking into factories. They stole entire barrels of industrial alcohol and pushed it into the black market. The government knew this was happening, but they couldn't stop the thefts, so they decided to make the stolen alcohol undrinkable. The government sent a secret order to industrial alcohol makers. They told them to add deadly poisons to every batch.
There was already some methanol in most industrial alcohol formulations, but the government added more, a lot more, to the point where it was sometimes 10% of the entire product.
People kept stealing industrial alcohol from factories. Only now it was poison, and they had no idea. It was bottled and sold across the country. Before long, there was a national disaster. On Christmas Eve, 1926, 60 people were rushed to the hospital. They all drank toxic holiday liquor. 8 of them passed away before Christmas morning, and the crisis only got worse. The poisoned alcohol was everywhere. In New York City alone, over 1,200 people became seriously sick. Around 400 of them passed away.
Victims would fall into a coma, and death often followed. The lucky ones, if you could call them that, would lose their sight, but at least they'd survive.
No one knew what was causing this sudden medical crisis, but one doctor was determined to figure it out. Charles Norris was the chief medical examiner of New York City. He watched these bodies pile up, and he figured out what was happening. He noticed that the victims all had one thing in common. They had been drinking. So the poison likely came from alcohol. But bootleggers wanted repeat customers. They wouldn't poison loyal buyers. So if bootleggers were not doing it on purpose, who was? To Norris, the answer was obvious. Norris called a press conference. Then he accused the government of poisoning alcohol.
But it wasn't a virulent flu or poorly chosen mushrooms that caused their deaths. It was alcohol that had been poisoned by the US government, which sounds like a conspiracy theory, but it's the truth.
Norris called it a national experiment in extermination. He also said the government must be held responsible for the deaths that poisoned liquor causes. Almost immediately, the government dismissed it as a conspiracy theory, but a few people believed it. It became a debate. Those who supported prohibition said alcohol was illegal, so anyone who drank it was breaking the law and deserved whatever happened. Others could not believe their own government would poison citizens. The idea sounded too extreme. Norris needed undeniable proof, and he knew exactly how to get it. Norris contacted Alexander Gettler. Gettler was the chief toxicologist for New York City. Gettler analyzed the bodies arriving at the morgue. Then he carefully tested samples taken from confiscated alcohol. The alcohol contained massive amounts of methanol, also known as wood alcohol. Consuming methanol would destroy the nervous system and cause blindness, and it could end lives slowly and painfully. Now, Norris and Gettler had proof of the government's poisoning program. They published their findings. Newspapers across the country reported the story. The public was outraged. The conspiracy theory was true all along. But even after the evidence came out, the poisoning program did not stop. Incredibly, the government admitted it and even doubled down on it. Officials announced that they would add even more toxic chemicals like benzene. They wanted the fear of death to scare Americans into obeying prohibition laws. But it didn't work. People still kept drinking, and many of them didn't survive. In December 1933, prohibition officially came to an end. Alcohol was no longer illegal. It was estimated that about 10,000 Americans passed away from these poison drinks. The whole program worked because people trusted what they were given. Nobody even questioned what was actually inside. The government counted on that. And cell phone companies have been doing that same thing for years. They show you one price but hide the fees in the fine print. So when you get the bill, it's much higher than you expect. But Mint Mobile, the sponsor of today's video, said, we're gonna be honest. Just tell people the actual price, and you don't have to sacrifice quality to get it, because every plan includes unlimited talk and text on the nation's largest 5G network, plus free calling to Mexico, Canada, and the UK. And you guys might be thinking that switching carriers is a massive headache. It's actually super simple. You can activate a new plan with an eSIM in minutes from the comfort of your couch. Plus, you can keep your same phone number and all of your existing contacts. It might sound too good to be true, but here's why they can do this. Mint Mobile brought the bulk buying concept to wireless. Basically, the more months you buy up front, the more you save. Mint lets you choose the data amount that's right for you, 5, 15, 20, or unlimited gigabytes. So you're paying for only what you actually need, not for some plan that doesn't fit you. And if you have any issues, Mint's customer support has a 96% satisfaction rate, which is pretty impressive, and a 7-day unconditional money-back guarantee. My friends, use my QR code or link below to stop overpaying for wireless, just because that's how it's always been. With premium plans starting at just $15 a month, Mint helps you break the traditional wireless cycle. This next conspiracy involves a plot to assassinate a world leader, and it failed because of one stupid mistake. The Mafia hit conspiracy. In the late 1960s, an investigative journalist made a shocking claim. He said the CIA hired American mafia to assassinate a world leader. The idea of the CIA working with gangsters seemed impossible. Then the evidence started coming out, and people realized it was far worse than they thought. In 1959, a revolutionary named Fidel Castro took power in Cuba.
Havana's ovation for Fidel Castro himself had been long deferred. These scenes show his triumphal march across the island to the capital following the victory.
The US government hated what Castro stood for. They wanted him gone. But Castro was heavily guarded. He already survived multiple assassination attempts. If the CIA wanted to reach Castro, they needed something he would never expect. They felt like they needed a gangster-type action. So the CIA reached out to the American mafia. Luckily for them, the mafia had its own reason to hate Castro. Before Castro took power, the mob controlled the many casinos in Cuba. They made millions of dollars. But when Castro took over, he shut down the casinos and kicked the mob out. The mafia lost a fortune, so the CIA and the mafia had a common enemy. And in 1960, they joined forces to destroy him. A CIA agent had a meeting with a Las Vegas mobster. The offer was simple. The CIA would pay the mafia $150,000 to eliminate Castro. But the mafia hated Castro so much that they insisted on taking the job for free. Later that year, the CIA and mafia secretly met again. This time, they discussed exactly how they would do it. The CIA wanted to use a firearm, but Castro was heavily guarded at all times. No gunman could get close enough to pull the trigger and escape. So the mafia suggested a quieter solution. They would use some type of potent pill that could be placed in Castro's food or drink. The CIA agreed. They returned to the lab to create the poison. Soon, they developed 6 pills filled with lethal toxins. Once they were slipped into Castro's drink, the pills would dissolve instantly, and they worked very fast. Castro's demise would look like a sudden natural illness. The CIA handed the pills over to the mafia. The mafia passed them to a Cuban official with access to Castro's food. The plan was in motion. The Cuban official placed the pills inside a freezer for safekeeping. He picked a time and day. All he had to do was slip the pills into Castro's chocolate milkshake. But at the last minute, the man chosen for the job made a stupid mistake.
When the would-be assassin went to retrieve the poisoned capsule from the freezer where he had hidden it, he found it frozen to the wall. His attempts to free the capsule caused it to rupture, scuppering the assassination attempts.
The pills were ruined. With no poison left to use, he called off the mission. After that, the mafia searched for someone else who could get close to Castro's food. But every plan failed before it could happen. In 1961, the assassination plan was officially abandoned. The CIA and mafia quietly went their separate ways. They believed the secret would be buried forever, but it didn't. Years later, an investigative journalist learned about the operation, and he published an expose in the newspaper. The CIA denied everything, but the truth was going to come out one way or another. In 1975, the CIA was accused of carrying out illegal activities, so the government set up a committee to investigate.
The United States must not adopt the tactics of the enemy. Means are as important as ends.
The investigation uncovered files that confirmed the CIA worked with the mafia. The story became front-page news. According to the files, the CIA met with two mob bosses during the negotiations. One was Chicago mob boss Sam Giancana. The other was Las Vegas mobster Johnny Rosselli. The committee called Sam Giancana to testify, but he never made it to the hearing. On June 19th, 1975, just days before his testimony, Giancana was found lifeless. He was assassinated in his home in Illinois. The timing was incredibly suspicious, but the committee moved on to its next witness, Johnny Rosselli. Thankfully, Rosselli managed to testify.
Rosselli was fully cooperative. For 2.5 hours, he told of plotting with the CIA starting in 1960 to try to kill Castro.
He told them about the meetings and the poison pills, everything, but speaking out was a fatal mistake. Shortly after his testimony, Rosselli disappeared. He was later found lifeless floating off the coast of Florida, but the truth was already out. Everyone knew the CIA secretly partnered with the mafia. Decades later, in 2007, more CIA documents were declassified. The files laid out the operation piece by piece. In our next chapter, a group of researchers ran a routine test and accidentally uncovered one of the biggest scandals in history: the toxic car conspiracy. Volkswagen looked like a company helping the planet. They claimed their cars released low emissions, making them better for the environment. Customers believed the message, but some researchers suspected it was all a lie. They believed Volkswagen cars were destroying the environment by releasing far more pollution than the company admitted. When they spoke up, nobody listened, so they went looking for proof. In 2013, a group of researchers decided to test Volkswagen's diesel cars. Volkswagen marketed those cars as clean diesel vehicles with low emissions. Here's one of their commercials.
Diesel in Latin means dirty. I'll prove it to you. You're gonna ruin your scarf. Oh, look what she's doing. See how clean it is?
The researchers took a Volkswagen Jetta to the lab and started their tests. It was a routine test. They did not expect to find anything strange. In the lab, the results were perfect. The car's emissions were low. Everything looked exactly how Volkswagen said it would. Then, the researchers took the car into the highway. That's when everything went wrong. On the road, the Jetta released emissions up to 40 times the legal limit. That meant it was more toxic than most cars on the road. The researchers were shocked because they tested the same car in the lab. And in the lab, the emissions were low. But on the road, it acted like a completely different car. The researchers double-checked their equipment by testing a BMW. The BMW's emissions stayed the same in the lab and on the road. But every time they tested a Volkswagen, the numbers changed. The cars seemed to lower their emissions in the lab. Then they seemed to raise them again on the road. There was only one explanation. Volkswagen somehow found a way to cheat the emissions test. The researchers dug deeper to understand how it worked. When they studied the car's software, they found what's known as a defeat device. This device could detect when the car was sitting still on a lab roller. Then it automatically reduced the car's emissions so it would pass the test. But once the car hit the road, it switched to normal mode, and the car released more pollution into the air. The researchers published their findings in May 2014. They accused Volkswagen of cheating emissions tests and lying to consumers. That scandal could have ruined the company. So Volkswagen replied immediately. But instead of admitting the problem, the company blamed the researchers for making mistakes.
They took exception with our testing, with the way we approached it, with the conditions that we used.
For over a year, Volkswagen refused to admit anything was wrong. They insisted that their cars were environmentally friendly, but the researchers refused to back down.
And we said, fine, we're going to do it again. And we did it again and came with the same results.
This time they sent the results to the Environmental Protection Agency. The EPA reviewed it carefully. Then the EPA made a massive decision. They refused to approve Volkswagen's 2016 models for sale in the US. The executives at Volkswagen now had a choice: lose their entire American market or confess. On September 3rd, 2015, Volkswagen executives finally admitted the truth. The company installed software on its cars to cheat emissions tests.
Today, the company said it would recall 11 million diesel cars worldwide after admitting they had been rigged to cheat emissions tests.
For years, those cars pumped high levels of pollution into the air. And the whole time, Volkswagen claimed it was making clean, low-emission cars. It was a global scandal. Volkswagen's CEO issued a public apology.
We are very sorry to have broken your trust. I think what they meant is we're very sorry to have lied to you.
During another speech, the CEO admitted to lying to authorities.
So let's be clear about this. Our company was dishonest with the EPA and the California Air Resources Board.
He eventually resigned. The company pleaded guilty to criminal charges. They paid over $30 billion in fines. It was one of the largest penalties ever handed to a car company. In the end, millions of people learned the truth. The car company they trusted was lying to them. Our next chapter is about a weapon the CIA built that could kill anyone, anywhere, and make it look completely natural. The heart attack conspiracy. For years, people claimed the CIA had a weapon that could give anyone a heart attack. All they had to do was point and pull the trigger. It was dismissed as a paranoid conspiracy theory. Later, the truth came out in the most shocking way. The heart attack gun was displayed on live TV for the whole world to see. In the early 1970s, the CIA had a problem. They wanted to eliminate people they considered threats, but they needed a method that could not be traced back to them. However, every option left evidence. A bullet could be traced. Poison could show up during an autopsy. They needed something cleaner. So they turned to a young CIA researcher named Mary Embry. Mary's bosses gave her one assignment.
They wanted me to find out if there was such a thing as a poison that was undetectable, especially one that seemed to mimic a heart attack.
They wanted a poison that left no trace, even during an autopsy. Mary got to work. She tested dozens of toxins. Eventually, she found what she was looking for: shellfish toxin. In concentrated doses, it could shut down the human heart. And even better for the CIA, it could disappear from the body. The CIA took Mary's discovery and built a weapon around it. They froze the toxin into a tiny dart made of ice. Then they loaded that dart into a modified pistol. The gun made almost no sound when fired. When the dart hit someone, it felt like an insect bite. Most people would ignore that sensation. But inside the body, the damage would start instantly. The dart would melt, releasing the shellfish toxin into the bloodstream. The victim would experience a massive heart attack, and that would be the end. When doctors performed an autopsy, they would find no strange substances, just a tiny red dot where the dart entered the skin. Nobody would think much of it. The death would be listed as natural causes. The CIA now had an untraceable weapon, and they could take out anyone they wanted. It's not clear how many times the heart attack gun was used, but one thing is certain: the CIA stockpiled large amounts of shellfish toxins and hid them in a lab. The shellfish toxin was the untraceable poison used in the gun. Over the years, things changed. In the mid-1970s, the CIA came under investigation. Congress heard reports that the agency was involved in illegal activities, so they formed a committee to investigate the CIA. Senator Frank Church led the probe. He and his team found a stockpile of weapons and toxins inside CIA labs and warehouses. One of those weapons was the heart attack gun. Eventually, the CIA director was invited before a congressional committee to answer questions. The hearing was broadcast on live TV. During the questioning, the pistol was held up for the entire country to see. The CIA director was asked about the weapon.
Does this pistol fire the dart?
Yes, it does, Mr. Chairman, and a special one was developed.
The country was shocked, and conspiracy theories were thrilled. There it was, proof that the CIA developed an illegal, untraceable assassination weapon. But one question has never been answered. Was it ever actually used successfully? The CIA never said, and they likely never will. Our next chapter raises a question. How much of what the news tells you is actually true? The CIA news conspiracy. The news is supposed to tell the truth, but people believe the government was secretly controlling the news that people heard, and they believe that certain journalists were actually government agents hired to push certain narratives and bury others. The government called it a conspiracy theory, but evidence began to show. It started with a student organization. In February 1967, it was revealed that the largest student group in the US was funded and run by the CIA. On the surface, the group looked independent. It presented itself as a friendly voice for young Americans. But behind the scenes, the CIA was quietly paying it to spread government propaganda to students. The agency also used students as spies. They were told to collect information from foreigners and pass it back to the CIA. The New York Times put the story on the front page. This revelation encouraged reporters to dig deeper. They wanted to find all the ways the CIA was secretly influencing the public, and then they stumbled onto something much bigger than they expected. In 1975, the New York Times suspected that some news reporters were secretly working with the CIA. When they investigated, they found out they were right. They discovered the CIA had a network of journalists inside major American newspapers and TV networks. The head of the CIA was called before Congress to answer for it. He admitted part of it was true.
We do have people who submit pieces to American journals.
Some journalists also admitted that the CIA contacted them to spread certain stories.
We had been contacted by the CIA. As a matter of fact, by the time I became the head of the whole News and Public Affairs operation in 1954, the ships had been established.
Congress identified over 50 active journalists on the CIA payroll, but the actual number was much larger. In 1977, another investigation revealed that over 400 American journalists carried out assignments for the CIA over a period of 25 years. These weren't small-time writers. They were evening news anchors, award-winning reporters, and Pulitzer Prize winners. People who ordinary Americans trusted deeply. CIA documents also revealed the agency could plant fake stories in foreign newspapers, and those same stories could be picked up by American media and reported it as real news.
This would mean that the CIA could manipulate the news in the United States by channeling it through some foreign country.
The CIA was essentially writing the news. It was such a big scandal that the president got involved. In 1977, a presidential order banned the CIA from using journalists. The message to the public was clear. It was over. It would not happen again. But not everyone believed that. Almost 20 years passed. In February 1996, a new CIA director appeared before a Senate committee. He was there to discuss threats to U.S. information systems. A senator asked him a direct question. Would the CIA promise to never recruit journalists again? The CIA director could not say yes. Instead, he gave an answer with a loophole.
The policy says that we will not use journalists except under American journalists, except under very, very rare circumstances.
That meant the CIA could still recruit reporters to shape the news, as long as they felt it was justified. It's a disturbing reality, especially because the news could be lying to you right now. Our next chapter is about a poison that every single American was breathing and almost no one knew. The Ethel conspiracy. In the 1950s, a scientist made a disturbing discovery. The average American had massive amounts of lead inside their body. Some people thought it was normal, but the scientist felt something far more dangerous was happening. He believed giant corporations were knowingly polluting air with toxic lead. But when he tried warning the public, those billion-dollar companies tried to ruin his life. The story began in the 1920s. Car companies discovered that adding lead to gasoline made engines run smoother. They called the new leaded gas ethyl. Car owners loved it. Selling ethyl was incredibly profitable, but there was a serious problem. Lead was toxic. In fact, lead was so toxic that workers in the leaded gas factories suffered hallucinations. Some even passed away from lead poisoning. Lead particles could spread through the air. Simply breathing too much could make people very sick. But the companies did not want to stop producing leaded gasoline. The business was making far too much money, so they refused to accept that lead was poisoning workers.
They knew that it was harmful. They tried to say that that didn't matter. They tried to blame the workers who got sick in their factories.
There was an even bigger issue. Cars using leaded gasoline released fumes that contained the lead. Those fumes dissolved into the air, and anyone who breathed that air also breathed in tiny amounts of lead. The car companies knew this could scare the public, so they tried to control the narrative. They wanted Americans to believe lead was safe. To do that, they hired scientists to defend lead. These scientists told the public that lead was naturally found inside the human body. They claimed this proved it was safe. Most Americans believed it, and because of that, millions of people inhaled leaded gasoline fumes every single day without realizing the danger. But one scientist was about to uncover the truth. In the 1950s, Claire Patterson was a geochemist at the California Institute of Technology. He was trying to calculate the exact age of the Earth by studying ancient rocks, but he kept running into a strange problem. Every sample he tested was contaminated with lead. There was lead in the air, lead in the dust, lead in the rocks, lead everywhere. The contamination was impossible to ignore. Where was all this lead coming from? Then Patterson made another discovery. Americans had 100 times more lead in their blood than ancient humans. Somehow this toxic chemical was almost everywhere in America. Patterson decided to go public. In 1965, he published a scientific paper explaining his findings. He made one thing very clear. Lead was dangerous to humans, and they needed to do everything to reduce lead contamination. The companies making billions from lead didn't like that. He was ruining their business, so they went after Patterson personally. First, they tried to destroy his career.
Eventually, a VP of an oil company who's a trustee at Caltech calls the president and asks for him to be fired.
Patterson's research funding was cut off. He was blocked from government meetings where environmental decisions were made. Patterson was smeared in the media. They painted him as a conspiracy theorist spreading science fiction. At the same time, the companies hired scientists to travel around the country claiming lead was harmless. For a while, it seemed they won. But they still wanted Patterson on their side, so the lead industry offered him research funding if he stopped criticizing them. It was basically a bribe, but Patterson refused to back down. He kept collecting evidence, he kept speaking out, and eventually Patterson got his moment. In 1966, Patterson testified before the US Senate. He arrived with overwhelming evidence. He showed the Senate the data from ancient ice cores. He explained how the ice from thousands of years ago was completely clean, while modern snow was 200% more toxic. He explained how lead damaged the human brain and nervous system, and how it caused learning disabilities in children and violent behavior in adults. Again and again, Patterson proved that lead pollution was man-made, and it was poisoning everyone from factory workers to school kids. His conclusion was clear. The amount of lead in the air skyrocketed after leaded gasoline was introduced. This time, the government listened. They began restricting leaded gasoline. By 1996, the use of leaded gasoline for vehicles was banned in the US, and the results were impossible to ignore. After the ban, lead levels in Americans' blood dropped by 78%. The companies profiting from leaded gasoline knew the dangers from the beginning, but they chose profits over public safety. And one man fought a billion-dollar industry to save the health of a nation. So the next time you go to a gas station and see the word unleaded, now you know why. My friends, the most dangerous thing you can do is trust blindly. Always do your own research and think critically about what you see and hear, and never stop seeking the truth. Visual Venture. Wait, before you guys go, make sure you guys watch part 1 of this true conspiracy theory series. We talk about a company that decided it was cheaper to let people die, world leaders performing strange rituals in the woods, and a spy program so ridiculous it sounds made up. Click right here to watch it. Love you guys. Peace.